He was a millionaire CEO, living a life full of money but empty of love. Until one evening changed everything. Driving home in his blue suit, Joseph found two little girls on the road, one crying, one unconscious. He rushed them to the hospital, only to uncover a truth that shattered his world. They were his daughters. This is a heart-melting story of suspense, love, and a father's new beginning. Joseph Miller, a man the world respected and feared, had spent his entire day locked inside meetings, striking deals worth millions. At 37, he was one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. His blue suit still held the neat creases from the morning, his tie was perfectly knotted, and his polished shoes gleamed under the dim streetlights. On the outside, he looked like the picture of success, but inside he carried nothing but silence. No children waiting at home, no wife to ask how his day had been. His life, though full of numbers and money, was painfully empty of love. That evening, the streets were unusually quiet. The city lights blinked in the distance as Joseph drove his luxury car slowly through the calm neighborhood, his mind lost in thoughts of work. Then, in one unforgettable instant, his heart skipped a beat. In the glow of his headlights, he saw them. Two little girls. One stood on shaky legs, her hair messy, her cheeks streaked with tears. She was no older than 6. Her small frame trembled as she waved her arms desperately in the air. The other child, her twin sister, lay on the hard ground beside her, motionless, still. Joseph's world narrowed into that moment. His chest tightened. The sight of the unconscious girl, so tiny and fragile, pierced through his cold, business-hardened heart like a knife. The standing child cried out with a voice so broken, so desperate, that it seemed to shatter the silence around them. "Help! Please help my sister!" Joseph's pulse thundered in his ears. Without hesitation, he slammed the brakes, his car screeching to a halt. He threw open the door and rushed toward them, his expensive blue suit brushing against dirt and dust as he dropped to his knees. He saw the little girl, Zoe, though he didn't yet know her name, clutching the hand of the unconscious one, Ella, shaking her gently as if her small strength could pull her back to life. Joseph's hands trembled as he leaned closer. He placed his ear near Ella's lips, searching desperately for breath. For a horrifying second, he heard nothing. Then, a faint, fragile breath brushed against his skin. Weak, barely there. "Hold on," Joseph whispered, though his voice cracked with fear. He had faced boardrooms of enemies, had stared down billion-dollar risks, but nothing had ever terrified him like this little girl's shallow breathing. He glanced at Zoe, whose wide blue eyes were swollen with tears. She looked at him as though he was her last hope, her only chance. In that instant, Joseph felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years, a fierce, protective need. Without thinking twice, he slid one arm under Ella's tiny back and the other beneath her fragile legs. Her weight was almost nothing in his arms, but to Joseph she felt heavier than the world. As he lifted her carefully against his chest, Zoe's small hand reached out, clutching at the sleeve of his blue suit, refusing to let him go. Her fingers were trembling, but her grip was strong, filled with desperate trust. Joseph didn't hesitate. With Ella in his arms and Zoe clinging to him, he rose to his feet, his heart pounding so loud it felt like the world could hear it. He didn't know who these girls were. He didn't know where they had come from. But one thing was clear in that moment. He could not and would not leave them. For the first time in years, Joseph Miller, the billionaire CEO who thought he had everything, realized he had just found something far more important than money, the chance to save 2 innocent lives. And with that, he whispered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else, "You're safe now. I've got you." Then, tightening his hold on Ella, he rushed back toward his car, his heart trembling with a fear and urgency he had never known before. Joseph carried Ella with the urgency of a man who knew every second mattered. Her limp little body rested in his strong arms as he rushed toward the car, Zoe hurrying beside him, clinging to his sleeve as though she feared he might disappear. The door swung open and Joseph didn't waste a single breath. Instead of placing Ella in the back seat where he couldn't watch her, he slid into the driver's seat with her cradled carefully across his lap. Her head rested against his chest, so small, so fragile, that it made his own heart feel as though it were breaking. Zoe climbed into the passenger seat, her knees pulled to her chest, her hands clasped tightly together as if in prayer. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her eyes never left her sister. Joseph gripped the steering wheel with one hand, the other holding Ella securely against him. He pressed down on the accelerator, and the car leapt forward into the night. The city lights blurred past, but Joseph barely saw them. His eyes kept darting downward to Ella's pale face. Each shallow rise and fall of her chest tore at him, carving a wound deeper than any loss of business or betrayal he had ever faced. "Stay with me, little one. Just stay with me," he whispered, his voice trembling. His breath shook as he pressed his lips to the top of her head, praying she could feel the strength of his heartbeat beneath her ear. Zoe's small voice broke through the silence, soft but heavy with desperation. "Please, mister, don't let her go." Joseph turned his head for a brief moment, his eyes locking with hers. She was so young, yet the fear in her gaze was older than her years. She wasn't pleading for herself, she was pleading for her twin, her other half. "I won't," Joseph said firmly, though his throat tightened around the words. "I promise you I won't let her go." His promise wasn't just words. It was a vow, one that burned in his chest with the heat of a fire he hadn't felt in decades. The road ahead stretched endlessly, yet Joseph pressed harder on the gas. The engine roared, but the only sound he heard was the weak, uneven breaths of the little girl in his arms. Every second felt stolen. Every breath she took felt like a miracle. Ella's tiny fingers twitched against his shirt. Joseph froze for a second, terrified it was her last movement. But then her weak hand curled faintly into the fabric of his blue suit. That small, fragile grip pierced him deeper than any victory ever could. "Good girl," he whispered, his lips brushing her hair. "Hold on, just a little longer. I'm right here." His own reflection flickered in the windshield, the powerful CEO everyone feared, now nothing more than a desperate man begging the universe to spare a child. His heart pounded louder than the engine, each beat screaming one word: faster. The traffic lights blurred red and green, but Joseph didn't care. The rules of the road didn't matter, only Ella's life did. He leaned forward, whispering to her again and again, his words shaky but full of determination. "Breathe, little one. Please breathe. Don't leave me like this." Beside him, Zoe tightened her hands together, whispering a broken prayer only a child could form. Her voice was soft, but Joseph heard every word. "God, please don't take my sister. Please let her stay." The innocence of her plea cut through Joseph like glass. He had prayed once in his life, years ago, but somewhere along the way, he had stopped believing. Now, as he sped through the night with two helpless girls, he found himself silently adding his own desperate prayer to Zoe's. The hospital was still minutes away, but each moment felt like an eternity. Sweat beaded at Joseph's forehead, not from heat, but from the crushing fear he had never known. He glanced down again, tightening his arm protectively around Ella. "Stay with me. Please, little one. Don't leave your sister. Don't leave me." In that moment, Joseph Miller, billionaire CEO, ruthless businessman, untouchable in the eyes of the world, wasn't a man of power. He was a man terrified of losing a child he hadn't even realized he couldn't live without. And as the car roared through the night, Joseph knew one truth with bone-deep certainty. Money couldn't save her. Only his love, his determination, and perhaps God's mercy could. And he would give everything, everything to keep her breathing. The hospital doors slid open with a sharp hiss as Joseph stormed inside, his blue suit clinging to him, Ella still cradled tightly against his chest. He didn't wait for help. His voice thundered through the sterile halls. "Someone help her. She's not breathing right." Nurses rushed forward, a stretcher wheeling into view. Joseph hesitated for the briefest moment before lowering Ella onto the bed, his hands trembling as though letting go would mean losing her forever. But as the doctors pushed her down the corridor, his heart lurched. Panic clawed at him. He had never felt so powerless. He started to follow, but felt a tug on his leg. Zoe, her tiny arms wrapped tightly around him, refused to let go. Tears streaked her cheeks and her little voice shook. "Don't leave me too." Joseph froze. Those words shattered him more than anything. Slowly he bent down, sliding his arms around her small frame. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. "I promise." The next hours were a blur of silence and waiting. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than any noise Joseph had ever heard in his life. He sat in the waiting room with Zoe curled up on his lap, her head resting against his chest. His once pristine blue suit was now wrinkled and warm from her small body. His tie hung loose, his hair was disheveled, but he didn't care. For once, appearances and status meant nothing. He stroked Zoe's hair softly, murmuring words he didn't fully understand. "She'll be okay. I'll protect you both. I promise." Each word was shaky, uncertain, yet they came from a place deeper than he knew existed inside him. Every time footsteps echoed in the hallway, Joseph's heart leapt, only to fall when it wasn't the doctor. He held Zoe closer, as if his strength alone could shield her from the cruel possibility of loss. Finally, after what felt like years, the doctor returned. Joseph rose instantly, still holding Zoe's hand tightly. "She'll be fine," the doctor said, and Joseph's chest nearly collapsed in relief. His knees almost gave way as the weight of fear lifted just slightly. She was weak from hunger, exhaustion, and stress, but she's a fighter. She's resting now. Joseph exhaled a shaky breath, his hand covering his mouth. Relief poured through him so strongly that his eyes burned. Zoe smiled faintly through her tears, whispering, "See, I told you she'd be okay." But the doctor's expression shifted. His voice grew slower, careful. "Mr. Miller, there's something unusual." Joseph stiffened. His instincts, sharpened by years of negotiations and betrayals, told him this was no ordinary statement. The doctor flipped through the file in his hands. "Their last name is Miller, same as yours." He paused, studying Joseph's face. "Are they related to you?" The words hit Joseph like a strike to the chest. Miller, his name, their name. For a long moment, Joseph couldn't breathe. His throat closed, his heart pounded so hard it echoed in his ears. He stared at the doctor, unable to answer. Memories long buried surged to the surface, memories of a woman he had once loved, a woman who had vanished without explanation. The truth he had buried beneath years of work, money, and cold ambition began to rise, unrelenting and sharp. His eyes flicked down to Zoe, who sat quietly, her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb as if she belonged there. Her features, so delicate, so familiar, suddenly seemed like echoes of his own. Joseph staggered back a step, gripping the edge of a chair for balance. His name, their name, his blood. Everything inside him screamed the same terrifying, beautiful truth. These girls weren't just strangers. They were his. Joseph's heart thundered in his chest as the doctor's words echoed in the sterile white hallway. "Their surname is Miller, same as yours." His mind reeled, tumbling backward through years he had tried to bury. He walked to the hospital records office, each step heavy, as if the polished floor beneath him was pulling him down into a truth he wasn't ready to face. His hands shook as he signed the authorization papers. When the folder was finally placed before him, he hesitated, staring at it like it was a ticking bomb. With trembling fingers, he opened it. The names leapt from the page: Zoe Miller, Ella Miller, mother Claire Anderson, father Joseph Miller. The blue ink burned his eyes. His throat closed. He pressed a hand to his mouth as memories struck like lightning. Years ago, there had been Claire. Her laughter, her warmth, the way she made him feel human instead of just a machine chasing money. He had planned to marry her, to build a family. But one morning she was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just a note that shattered him. He had buried that love under stacks of contracts and skyscrapers. He told himself she didn't love him, that maybe she had found someone else. He never searched. He thought moving forward meant survival. And now, two little girls bore his name, his daughters, his flesh and blood. His knees buckled, and he sank down onto the cold hospital floor, folder still clutched in his hands. His sharp blue suit pulled tight across his shoulders, but he didn't care. Tears blurred the words on the page, dripping onto the paper, smudging the ink. A soft tug at his sleeve brought him back. Zoe, her tiny hands curled into fists, stood before him with wide, watery eyes. "Mister." Her voice was timid, fragile, like glass about to shatter. Why do you look like us?" Joseph froze. He saw it now. The same ocean blue eyes, the same dimple on the right cheek that appeared when Zoe forced a trembling smile. Even Ella, asleep down the hall, had his jawline, his soft curls. He couldn't hold it in any longer. His lips trembled, his voice breaking apart like a man who had spent too many years alone. "Because—" He swallowed hard, his hand rising to brush away Zoe's tears. "Because I'm your father." The words tumbled out, heavy and raw. For a moment, silence filled the hallway, stretching thin as Zoe's little chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. Her mouth parted, her small shoulders shook, and then she stumbled forward, collapsing against him with all the force her 6-year-old body could muster. Her arms wrapped tightly around his neck as if she had been waiting her whole life for this truth. Joseph clung to her, burying his face in her golden hair, inhaling the innocence and the ache of lost time. "I didn't know," he whispered, voice cracking. "I swear I didn't know. But I promise, I'll never let you go again." For the first time in years, Joseph Miller, the billionaire CEO, the man feared in boardrooms, the man dressed in power and steel, was simply a father, broken and reborn in the same moment. And in that hospital hallway, with a little girl's arms around his neck and the ghost of the past lifting from his shoulders, he realized his empire had meant nothing compared to the two small hearts that now belonged to him. Zoe's small gasp echoed in the hospital room, and Joseph turned just in time to see Ella stir weakly on her bed. Her eyes fluttered open, hazy and tired, but they landed on him with an intensity that pierced his chest. For a moment the room went still, just the quiet hum of machines and the faint rhythm of her breathing. Ella's lips parted, her voice barely more than a whisper. You came back?" Joseph's heart shattered. That question carried more weight than all the deals and contracts he had ever signed. He rushed to her side, kneeling low, his blue suit creasing as his body bent toward the fragile girl. His hand trembled as it brushed a strand of hair from her pale forehead. "I didn't know I left you," he whispered, guilt choking his throat. "But now that I've found you, I will never leave again, I promise." Zoe clung to his arm, her wide eyes brimming with tears. Ella blinked slowly, as though testing if his words were real. And in that instant, Joseph knew it wasn't money, nor power, nor status that they needed. They needed him, his presence, his protection, his love. The very next day, he filled their hospital room with life. He brought soft pajamas patterned with stars, warm blankets that smelled of comfort, and trays of food better than anything they had tasted in weeks. But more than gifts, he gave them what their little hearts had been starving for, love that didn't leave, a father who stayed. At night, instead of board meetings or phone calls, Joseph sat by their bedsides. His voice, once used to command investors and employees, softened as he read bedtime stories. His deep tone wrapped around fairy tales and adventures, carrying Zoe and Ella into safe dreams. When Ella's hair tangled from days in bed, he brushed it gently, his large hands surprisingly tender as they smoothed each strand. When Zoe's small fingers searched for comfort in the dark, he offered his hand, never letting go until her eyelids fluttered shut in sleep. Sometimes he hummed lullabies he hadn't thought about since his own childhood, songs his mother used to sing when life was still simple. The tune cracked in his throat, but the girls leaned into it, their tiny chests rising and falling in peace. Soon, his once pristine blue suit bore the marks of fatherhood. Crayon scribbles stained the sleeves where Zoe had colored on him absent-mindedly. Cookie crumbs clung to the fabric where Ella had leaned against his chest while eating. Tiny handprints decorated his jacket from when the girls climbed into his lap. And Joseph didn't care. He wore those marks like medals of honor. Each stain, each smudge was proof that he was no longer just the cold, unreachable CEO the world saw. He was something infinitely greater, a father, chosen by two little girls who needed him. As he watched Zoe and Ella sleep, their soft breaths filling the room, Joseph finally understood what had been missing from his life all along. Not money, not power, not another business victory. It was this: tiny hands holding his, fragile voices calling him Dad, innocent eyes looking at him with trust he would spend the rest of his life protecting. For Joseph Miller, the empire he had built now felt small compared to the two kingdoms lying in hospital beds. His daughters, his world, his new beginning. Weeks later, Joseph walked out of the hospital holding Zoe in one arm and Ella in the other. He wasn't just walking with children, he was walking with his second chance at life. His mansion, once cold and silent, filled with giggles, toys, and bedtime songs. His heart, once chained to money, now belonged to two little girls who taught him what true wealth meant. Society often measures success in money and status, but Joseph's journey proved something greater. Real success is measured in love, family, and the bonds we protect. Two little girls didn't just find their father that night, they gave him back his soul. And in the end, Joseph Miller, the billionaire in a blue suit, learned the greatest lesson of all: love is life's true fortune.